Assalamu alaikum viewers. My name is Akif Wala, and as a part of Rehan AI teacher training course, I am back with another TED Talk review. Today, the TED Talk that we are going to review is How Great Leaders Inspire Action by Simon Sinek. This TED Talk was presented at TED in Talks in 2009, and its central idea is remarkably simple. Great leaders do not begin by telling people what they do; they begin by explaining why they do it. And that simple shift in perspective is what makes this talk so powerful. So, what makes Simon's presentation worth watching even today? Let's explore it. One of the first thing I noticed about this talk is that Simon does not begin with a complicated leadership theory or long definition of leadership. Instead, he starts with a question: why? Why do some people in an organization inspire people to follow them, while others, despite having excellent products, sources, and talented teams, struggle to create the same level of loyalty? This is brilliant way to engage the audience because instead of immediately giving us an answer, he creates curiosity. And curiosity is one of the strongest tool as the speaker can use. When an audience wants to know the answer, they become participant in the presentation rather than passive listeners. Simon then introduces the concept that becomes the foundation of the entire talk, the golden circle. Imagine three circles. At the center is why, around it is how, and then on the outside is what. According to Simon, every organization knows what it does. Some organizations also know how they do it, but very few clearly communicate why they do it. And here, why does not simply mean making money. Money is a result. The deeper question is what is your purpose? What is your belief? What is the reason your organization exists beyond simply selling a product or providing a service? This is where the presentation becomes much more interesting. Simon argues that most organizations communicate from the outside in. They tell us what they make it, and perhaps eventually why it matters. But inspirational organizations communicate in the opposite direction. They start with the why, then explain how, and finally tell us what they do. This is the golden circle. And one of the best things about this concept is its simplicity. You don't need a business degree to understand three words: why, how, and what. That simplicity is actually one of the major strengths of this presentation. Simon then uses Apple as one of its central examples. Instead of imagining Apple simply saying, we can make computers and smartphones, he explains how the company's communication can be understood through the golden circle. The what is the product, the how represents the way the company approaches design and innovation, but the why represents a belief, challenging the status quo and thinking differently. And this helps explain why customers can develop an emotional connection with a brand rather than simply comparing technical specifications. The important lesson here is that people are not always motivated purely by features, prices, or specification. They can also be motivated by what they believe a company or leader represents. And this idea isn't limited to companies. Simon expands his arguments by discussing the Wright brothers and their efforts to achieve powered flight. He contrasts them with better funded competitors and uses the story to demonstrate how belief, purpose, and commitment can attract people who are willing to work towards something bigger than themselves. Then he moves to another powerful example, Martin Luther King Jr. And this is where the idea of leaderships become much bigger than business. King did not simply communicate a list of policies or instructions. He communicated a vision. People were able to connect themselves with that vision because they believed in what it represented. This is an important distinction in leadership. A manager can tell people what to do. A leader gives people a reason to want to do it. And this difference is at the heart of Simon's argument. Another fascinating part of the talk is the way Simon explains the connection between the golden circle and the human decision making. He connects the why with the emotional and decision making part of the brain, and the what with the more rational explanation of our decisions. The broader message that human beings do not always make decisions through logic alone. We often feel first and rationalize later. This is why the message that connects with someone's belief can be more powerful than a message that simply presents facts. And I think this is one of the most useful lessons for anyone who communicates. Whether you are a teacher, entrepreneur, manager, content creator, salesperson, student, or even a parent, you are constantly trying to influence people through a communication. And the question is, are you only telling people what to do, or are you helping them understand why it matters? Now, let's talk about Simon's presentation style itself. His delivery is relatively simple. There are no complicated visual effects. It doesn't depend on flashy animation or an enormous number of slides. Instead, he relies heavily on storytelling, repetition, examples, humor, and one memorable visual framework. The golden circle becomes a mental map that the audience can keep returning to throughout the presentation. This is an excellent presentation style, and a good presentation doesn't necessarily require more information. Sometimes it requires one powerful idea that can organize all the information around it. Simon also uses repetition very effectively. The words why, how, and what appear again and again. Normally, excessive repetition can become boring, but here it works because every example reinforces the same framework. Apple, the Wright brothers, Martin Luther King Jr., different situation, but the same underlying idea. This gives the audience a sense that the concept is being tested across different contexts. Another strength is storytelling. Instead of saying purpose is important, Simon gives us people and organization that demonstrated the idea. Stories can make abstract concepts easier to remember. And that is something we can learn from creating our own presentation. If you want your audience to remember an idea, don't simply define it, show it through a story. However, I think there is also an important point of critical analysis. The golden circle is an extremely useful communication framework, but we should be careful about treating it as a complete explanation of leadership success. Real leadership is more complicated. Having a compelling why does not automatically make someone a great leader. Execution matters, competence matters, ethics matters, communication matters, and perhaps most importantly, the why has to be genuine. A company can create an impressive purpose statement and still fail if its actual behavior contradicts that purpose. So the real lesson isn't simply saying why. The deeper lesson is know your why, communicate it clearly, and make sure your actions support it. And that brings us to the most practical part of the TED Talk. How can we apply it to our lives? Let's take a simple example. Suppose someone says, I want to learn artificial intelligence. That's the what. Then they say, I will learn Python, machine learning, automation, and AI tools. That's the how. But then we ask, why? Maybe the answer is, I want to develop skills that allow me to solve real world problems, create opportunities, and build a better career. Now the goal has meaning. The same principle can apply to education, business, leadership, and personal development. Instead of asking why, what am I doing? Ask why am I doing it? Then ask how will I do it? And finally, what exactly will I deliver? The simple sequence can completely change the way we communicate our goals. For me, the biggest takeaway from Simon's talk is that leadership is not simply about having authority, it is about creating belief. People may follow instructions because they have to, but they follow a vision because they want to. And perhaps that's why the TED Talk has remained so influential for so many years. It takes a complicated subject, human motivation, and turns it to a simple question that almost anyone can understand. Why? So, uh, if you are a leader, teacher, student, or content creator, I would encourage you to try one exercise after watching this talk. Take something important that you are currently working on, write down your what, then write down your how, and finally go deeper and ask yourself, why does this matter? If you can clearly answer that question and communicate the answer authentically, you may find that people don't just understand what you are doing, they understand why they should care. And that, according to Simon, is where inspiration begins. Overall, I would highly recommend how great leaders inspire action, not because it gives everyone answer about leadership, but because it gives a powerful lens through which we can rethink leadership, communication, marketing, and even our own personal goals. The most memorable idea is simple. Start with why. Because people may understand what you do and how you do it. But when they connect with why you do it, they are much more likely to connect with the purpose behind your action. And that is what separates simple communication information from truly inspiring people. That was all about today's TED Talk review. Hope you enjoyed the session. I will be back with another TED Talk. Until then, signing off. Allah Hafiz.